All right, why don't we get started? We'll keep it on time so that we can wrap up as soon as possible and get to happy hour, because I know that's what you're all waiting for. All right, so first caveat, this is not a vendor pitch. I will not tell you about Limelight. I will not tell you about what our CDN does. If you want to know what we do, go to limelight.com. That's my only spiel about the company. What I'm going to talk about today is delivering video to millennials, right? And so what we ended up doing was we did some consumer research that we called the state of online video, and it sort of explored a bunch of behaviors around how people use video and what their perceptions are of the experience. And so I'm going to walk you through some of that data today. But before I do that, this is my contact info. I love to have conversations on Twitter, so you'll see my Twitter handle pretty much on every slide. So if you want to tweet something like a picture of a slide, I'll happily engage with you after. And there's my email address and my phone number as well, and I'll show that I am the bringer of the apocalypse. That's fantastic. We're just going to continue. We are not going to stop until they kick us out of the building. Oh, that's fantastic. All right, so alarm notwithstanding, before I kick off talking about this data, what I want to give you is sort of some background on the market. And you've heard some of this morning. So Jack Waters talked about this a little bit, and some of the other presenters have talked about this a little bit. But the market for OTT and for online video is going to be absolutely astronomical, right? It's going to be huge. And that's something that we just have to keep in mind and keep in consideration as I talk about some of this data, sort of why is this important? And then, of course, there's the infamous quote from VNI, from the Visual Networking Index report. This is from Cisco. If you haven't had a chance to read this, I highly recommend you do. But this stat in and of itself is fantastic, right? 80% of IP traffic will be video by 2020. Now, another study I found, it was done by Millward Brown. I'm still going. That was covered by Ad Age, talked about this number, 204 minutes of video viewing. And what they did is they analyzed when people were watching TV, linear broadcast, versus watching online. And what they found was not only is it 204 minutes, it's actually split evenly. So even though people are watching a lot of linear broadcast television soon, they're also watching a ton of online video. Now, I don't know about you, but this pretty much blows my mind when I think about how big this market is, right? I feel like Kramer. All right, now the cool thing about this is a global opportunity. I'm not going to talk just about North America. The study that we did covered 4 countries around the world, a lot of different demographics, a lot of different individual characteristics. And this is what's really important about online video, is it's not just confined to one single region in the world. And I think we all know this, intuitively, right? Everyone around the world is watching more video. But the question is who's watching the video? That's the real question. I'm still going, even though the alarm is still going. And you'll never guess, these are the people that are watching most of your online video. Yay, it's over. And who are these people? They're millennials, right? Millennials are consuming a tremendous amount of video. So let me turn back now, and this slide's a little dark, I apologize, but let me turn back to the US for a second, because that's where I could get a lot of this data. But the US Census Bureau reports on how big the millennial demographic is. Okay. Yeah, that's... There's going to be an announcement soon, though. Oh, even better. So as you can see here, on the far left-hand side is the millennial group, ages 15 to 35. Yeah, people have differences of opinions around... We'll wait for this one.
May I have your attention, please? This is the Fire Safety Director. This is the Fire Safety Director. May I have your attention, please? May I have your attention, please?
You've got it.
This is the Fire Safety Director. An alarm has been received, and we are investigating the cause. An alarm has been received, and we are investigating the cause at this time. When the cause has been determined, you will be notified. You will be notified.
Even better.
Fire Safety Director.
In other words, and this is going to be really funny later on in this presentation, is another interruption to your experience here in this room. Keep that in mind. Just keep that in mind. So the Census Bureau, so if you see ages 15 to 35, it's 92 million. And then next on that is Gen Xers, which are about 61 million. And then lastly, our baby boomers, which you can't really see in the shadows, are about 77 million. So in other words, in the US, and you can extrapolate this around the world, is that millennials are the largest demographic. And if you then take it back out a step, So looking at things globally again, it's not just that they're a huge demographic, they have a tremendous amount of purchasing power. So about $2.45 trillion. So when we're thinking about, are they making decisions about who's watching what, where are they watching, when they're watching, millennials are driving a lot of these OTT subscriptions that I'll talk about in a second. There's a real move by millennials to spend that money and to make those purchases. So it's something that we have to pay attention to. All right, now we get to the study data. So this is one of the graphs from the study. And let me explain what this graph means. So on the left-hand side, and this is pretty much how all the graphs are set up. On the left-hand side is everyone else, which means Gen Xers and baby boomers and anybody not in the millennial demographic. And on the right-hand side are millennials. And what's really interesting about this graph is on the left-hand side, you see that big blue bar at the top, right? Everyone is watching about an hour to 2 hours of online video per week. Not a tremendous amount. And of course, you have to take this with a grain of salt in that these are what people have verbally agreed to, right? So it's not actually monitoring their behavior across a service like Nielsen. We're asking them questions. But when you look at millennials, you can see how the graph distribution is much different. They've discovered and investigated. That's awesome.
Have your attention, please. May I have your attention, please? This is the Fire Safety Director. This is the Fire Safety Director. An alarm has been received, and we are investigating the cause. When the cause has been determined, you will be notified.
Didn't we already hear that one? Wow, that was a needless interruption. All right. So you can see the graph distribution on millennials. The blue bar is smaller, so less of them are watching 1 to 2 hours a week, and it's distributed across all the other bars. They're watching a ton more online video. So again, millennials are really driving some of this trend when we talk about OTT subscriptions, we talk about YouTube. It's really about millennials consuming more and more content online. So how do they feel about your video, though? That's the real question. Are you delivering the kind of experience that they want from your online video? Now, you can have this kind of experience. Millennials could be super happy going, yes, I'm getting the content I want, and I'm getting the quality of experience I want. This is fantastic, 2 thumbs up. But that's not usually the case, right? What we're finding is that there's a lot of dissatisfaction around the video experience, the online video experience. So if you look at this graph from Parks & Associates, you can see that there's a lot of cancellations around OTT, and we know that. We know that there's a ton of interruptions. Come on, spit it out. All right, we'll just keep going.
May I have your attention, please? May I have your attention, please? This is the Fire Safety Director. May I have your attention, please? May I have your attention, please? This is the Fire Safety Director.
Don't say it again.
An alarm has been received,
No.
and we have been investigating the cause. At this time, we investigated the cause. There is no condition at this time. There is no condition at this time. Thank you for the time and attention. Sorry for the inconvenience.
All right. Back to Parks & Associates. So we know there's a lot of churn happening in the industry. We know that people are dropping off their OTT services. We know that people are stopping their subscriptions. So the question is why? What's the reason behind that? So that's what we set out to find out. We set out and we surveyed about 1,200 consumers in 4 countries, which was the US, the UK, Australia, and Singapore. And what we wanted to understand was more about why people were not only cutting the cord, but what were their perceptions around the online video experience, and especially millennials. We really wanted to dig into millennials. And so we crafted the survey so that we could carve out that demographic at the end of it and really sort of understand what was driving their behavior. Now, there were 3 things that we kind of uncovered in this data. The first is that there is this thing about a video experience, right? We know that there's something about quality of experience. People are watching the video, they experience it in some way, whether it's bad, bit rate changes or other things. Interruptions cause problems in the video experience. We also discovered something about choice, that there's a real need for choice, both with content type and with device type, that are, again, driving some of that video experience. And then lastly, we found out something really interesting about advertising and how millennials feel about online video advertising. So I'm going to go through each of these 3 things. So let's talk about the video experience first. Once again, this is we're diving into the study data and details. So again, on the left we got everyone else, on the right we got millennials. And the question we asked them is, what do you find most frustrating about watching online video? And the thing that sticks out right here is the blue bar, right? The blue bar is the longest bar, so visually you're like, okay, that's got to be the most important thing. And it is. And the most important characteristic is when the video buffers. So we know that not only do everyone else hate when the video buffers, millennials hate it as well, but it's actually a more interesting bar is this green bar at the top. So on the left-hand side, where we have what that green bar stands for is the video quality is poor, right? Everyone else is around 2.59, and 4 being the most frustrating. Millennials are a significant number more, right? So what that tells us is they're really concerned not just with interruptions like buffering, but they're actually very concerned about the quality of the video itself. And this is actually reflected in a Conviva study that found out about a third of video watchers will abandon a video if it has grainy or if it's got, what would be akin to old-time static, right? If it's a poor quality. And they look at billions of video streams a day. So what this tells us, oh, I have another slide. I forgot I added this. One more slide about quality. This is from a University of Massachusetts Amherst study done in 2012, where they looked at the relationship of start time and abandonment rate. And so what we have on the left-hand side has to do with short and long-form content. And what we're seeing is if it's long-form, it's a little bit less abandonment. But you can see that as the startup is delayed, more and more, there's more apt our users are to abandon the video stream. So it's just really important to think about what's happening in this video experience that's causing users to drop off, right? It's buffering, it's bad quality, it's slow startup times. What it really comes down to is this. Millennials really want broadcast quality. What have they been raised on? They've been raised on sitting on the couch, grabbing the remote control, turning on the TV, and it just appears perfectly. There's no stuttering, there's no artifacting, there's no jitter, there's no buffering, there's nothing. It's a perfect picture. They didn't grow up in the days of rabbit ears and static TVs, right? They grew up in the land of perfect signal strength. And so they've taken those expectations into online video. They want that same kind of experience. All right, so let's talk a little bit about choice. Choice is very interesting, especially in our study. So in this question, we asked them is how many OTT services do you currently subscribe? We call them pay online services. And what's interesting is you'll notice on the left-hand side of everyone else, the green bar is really high. It's almost 50%, right? Not a lot of non-millennials are subscribing to OTT services. When you look on the right-hand side, that number's cut in half, and it's redistributed not only to the number 1, but also to the number 2, and especially 3, and even 4 is double the number of what everyone else is. Millennials love content. And so they're looking for opportunities to consume as much content as they can. Remember, back in the beginning when I showed that graph about how many people are consuming online content, they want choice. And so they're willing to subscribe to more than one service to get the kind of content that they want. So they might want a little from here, a little from there, a little from over there. But it's not just about content. So what we also discovered was that millennials are really prolific in the kinds of devices they use. So we put the red bar around PS4 just to showcase that that was the number 1 device that millennials are using to watch online video on their television sets. But when you look at the distribution of all of these other numbers, they're not just using a PS4, they're using a Chromecast, they might have an Apple TV as well, they might also have a smart TV with apps. They're using multiple devices to consume content. So they want a choice of where to watch and when to watch. Now, this was a really interesting question that we asked because we wanted to get to the root of, again, this thing about choice. And so we asked them under what circumstances would they cut the cord, right? Would they terminate their subscription to their pay TV provider? And it's really interesting. The one thing that sticks out, the graphs are relatively the same, right? When it comes down to it, people will cut the cord for a number of different reasons. But the interesting reason is at the top. So it's when I can directly subscribe to the channels I want online. So if you look at the left side and everyone else, that's about 14%. That goes up to 20% with millennials. So when millennials want choice and they see online as providing them that choice, they're willing to cut those subscriptions. They're willing to cut that relationship with that cable provider. So again, really driven by this need to find the content that they want. And another question we asked, which was really about where do they watch their online videos most, you can see the red bar is YouTube, right? So hands down, YouTube is the number 1 place that both non-millennials and millennials are watching the most of their video. But what's interesting is, again, millennials are predominantly more YouTube. And what is YouTube all about? choice. I can go to YouTube and pretty much find any content I want, right? Besides Hollywood content, and again, I'm subscribing to OTT services for that. So for millennials, YouTube is intrinsically in the mix because it provides them a level of choice to go find what they want and get the content that they want. Now, this is from an interesting markets-to-markets study where they went out and surveyed people in the video industry. And what they came up with was the survey respondents felt that there were going to be between about 10, I think it was 15 to 20 niche OTT services by 2018 that would have over 100,000 subscribers each. So what that's telling us, again, is that perhaps there's an opportunity here for content owners and content distributors to think about targeting the content so that they're providing that choice to millennials, right? Instead of just offering everything like Netflix does, maybe doing it like Drama Fever or doing it like Crunchyroll, right? And focusing in on a specific target kind of content will attract more millennials who are looking for that specific content. When it comes down to it, choice is king, right? It's not content that's king, it's choice is king. All right, advertising. Now this was very, very interesting. So one of the things we asked our respondents, our survey respondents, was, I will generally abandon a video if. And we gave them a bunch of choices, right? You can see those choices. There's an ad before the video, there's an ad before the video, and I can't skip it. There are too many ads during the video. So we asked them a lot of these different responses. And I've highlighted the one in the red box because that's the most interesting. Here we're seeing a lot more AVOD OTT subscription services coming out. We're seeing lots of people trying it out. And here we have this data from millennials especially that's telling us they're about twice as likely to abandon a video if there's an ad in front of it. I mean, and think about it just intuitively, how annoying is that? Especially if you can't skip it. But how annoying is you're going to watch a piece of content and there's an ad? It destroys the whole experience of going to that content. You have to stop the interruptions. All right, so when it comes down to it, how do you make millennials happy? What do you have to do in order to provide a great video experience for those millennials? I've got 3 things, right? The first thing is you have to use a CDN. Now, I'm biased, I work for a CDN. I'm not saying you have to use a commercial one. You have to use a CDN, build it yourself, right? Or use a commercial CDN, but you have to be able to deliver at scale, at the highest bit rate possible, with the fastest startup times, and you can't do that if on the left-hand side of this picture, everything is coming back to a single origin, right? It has to be spread out around the globe. You have to deliver as close to the end user as possible. So that's number one. You really got to use a CDN to deliver the kind of video experience that millennials are going to be drawn back into. The second thing is you have to have a multi-device strategy. Now, I know we say that, and a lot of people go, oh, yeah, I've got multi-device strategy. But what are you doing to make sure that the content is available not only on these devices, but on also devices like Rokus and Xboxes and PS4s? So it's not just multi-device in the way that we always think about it. It's this entire universe of devices, because millennials are watching that content from everywhere. And just to punctuate that, this is from a 2014 study with Google and Ipsos. And what they looked at was they actually had millennials fill out a diary of their online video watching. And they asked them where they watched their video. And so as they filled out this diary, they discovered some really interesting data. About 98% of the millennials were watching video from their mobile phones. So thinking about that multi-device strategy, you can see here, there's no device that's not covered, right? They're watching them from all their devices. They're moving around. They're moving from smartphone to tablet to PC, all to watch the same viewing experience. Now the last thing, and I'll admit this took me a little time to find on YouTube, because YouTube publishers are getting smarter about this. But I went to the Mean Tweets Live from the Jimmy Kimmel Show. Took me about 10 tries on different publishers to find this ad that appeared at the front of the video that I couldn't skip. So here I was waiting for this content, and I had to sit through 15 seconds of a Home Depot ad. And it was a terrible experience. Now, would I have stayed for it? Maybe, because again, content drives the decision-making process. And if I really wanted to see the content, maybe I'll just look off into space while the ad's there, or I go back to playing my video game while the ad's there, or I'm tweeting on my phone, whatever I'm doing. But the point is that there's something interrupting. So I talked about, remember, the interruptions we had in my presentation. You're going to remember that from this experience. You're going to remember it being interruptive. That's what an ad does to the video experience. And I found it kind of funny that even The Simpsons got it right, right? So here's a little Simpsons cartoon, and there's a skip ad button in there. So even they understand that you have to be able to skip. Kind of to sum it up, right? There's three things really. You've got to make your video broadcast quality. That's the number one thing. It's got to be reflective of the way that millennials have grown up watching television. The second thing is you have to provide choice, both in content and in device and in consumption. And the third thing is you have to avoid any of these interruptions. Every interruption counts against your video experience. And that's what you have to avoid. And with that, I say thank you very much. I think I'm spot on with 20 minutes. Woohoo! Closer to happy hour. All right. Dan said I could go over a little bit, so I'll open it up for just a second. If anyone has any questions about the data, how we gathered it, some of our findings, I'd be happy to answer any of those questions for you. And again, there's my contact info, so you can tweet what you want. You have a... Oh, yeah.
So are there any advertising models that millennials are okay with?
So it didn't seem to be. I think when we have ads in front of videos, if there's a skip button, they're much more likely to just click the skip button right away. So there is some brand impact there. I mean, Google has done studies on that. They launched a skip ad program about 10 years ago. And they've been educating publishers over time that you have to let people skip your ads. So I think when you get to the ad skipping things, millennials are okay with that. But it's still, the ad is still interruptive. So the more ads you put in your video, the more interruptions you're going to get.
But if they hit skip, then nobody gets paid, right?
Well, from a YouTube perspective, I still think that there's some impression. It has to be a certain amount of time that goes by on the ad.
Comments on ad blockers?
That's an interesting. So comments on ad blockers. I don't have any. Yeah, no, I have not been thinking about ad blockers a lot. I'm sure millennials are using them, probably in a higher proliferation than other demographics. You know, it's going to be a real interesting thing to get around them. You know, that's obviously advertisers are going to have to figure out a way to keep those ads involved because that's how they deliver their message and how they're generating revenue. But the millennials, they hate it. They hate it from the video experience. So we've got to figure out some balance between the two.
No ads kind of goes hand in hand with a subscription-based, service. Do you have any idea about how a subscription-based service impacts, whether millennials are interested in your content or not?
No, that's a great question. We're getting ready to field this study again, so we're constantly sort of iterating on the study as we field it, and that would be a really interesting question to ask. I mean, one of the things that we noticed was that there's a lot of millennials are subscribing to more OTT services, so they're clearly drawn in by the subscription model, and you've got CBS All Access is flirting with a subscription model that's no ads, so for a higher price point. Was that an I'm done? Okay. And then I think there's a couple others that are also flirting with no advertising. I mean, Hulu has a no advertising model as well, right? So it would be interesting to get data from them to find out how many more people are subscribing to those services for the extra money to get no ads than those that aren't. But I don't have any specific data on millennials about it. Question? So we had actually asked that study. This is the third version of the study that we published. We asked that question in a previous study and we dropped it. We found that millennials were watching more long-form content. So they were tending to gravitate towards movies and TV shows versus original content on YouTube, for example. So it was clearly aligned with the subscription-based services that they were inhabiting, but what it is telling us is that long-form content was much more interesting to them, and especially even on smartphones.
Did your study at all take into account live content versus video on demand?
It doesn't. No, we didn't dig into that, and that's another interesting question that we might ask in future versions.
So the video seemed very, very unpopular with millennials. Is there any reason for that?
No, I think that because Vimeo came later to the game, I mean, YouTube has that brand recognition, and everyone just goes to YouTube. So when people say like, oh, you got to see this video, it's on YouTube. How many times do you hear you got to see this video, it's on Vimeo? not very often. So I just think it's a brand recognition issue, and Vimeo's recent acquisition of VMX will actually be very interesting for them in competing against YouTube. So it'll be interesting to see in the future if Vimeo comes out a bit stronger in our study.
What about consumption on smartphones and mobile, consumption on mobile phones versus
Sure. So I didn't put. No, it's a great question. I didn't put that data in here. We are seeing the laptop and desktop are still the primary means by which millennials consume video content, but the smartphone is almost neck and neck now with the desktop and laptop, and the tablet's probably number 3.
when you say smartphones, you mean you're talking about cellular network, not using Wi-Fi.
Correct. So we didn't ask that question. You're actually the second person to bring that up in this presentation that I've given. So we are asking that in the next study that we're fielding around when they're connecting. Are they connected to cellular network or are they connected to Wi-Fi?
And you believe that CDNs are the solution even for this?
A CDN is difficult to help on a cellular network because the cellular network is so variable. But having content that's closer to the end user, you're still going to have less latency and less performance problems than if they have to traverse thousands of miles to go back to origin. So yeah, so even if you have to build your own CDN and put servers and data centers around where your users are located, that's definitely the way you need to do it. Oh, one more question.
How about millennial behavior, like interacting via the scrub bar, events, and tools like that?
So the question was, I'm sorry, I haven't been repeating questions. So the question was about millennial interaction with the video player itself, right? We didn't do any exploration into that. So we didn't actually get into the details on how they're interacting with the player, but it's an interesting question to pose to them.
Yeah, so you mentioned that there were a few different streaming subscriptions, and frequently millennials, were subscribed to multiple streaming
Right.
situations, and every day there are more niche, streaming situations. At what point does it kind of become undoable? If I have 7 different streaming subscriptions, I might as well just bundle and go with cable or something, right?
Yeah.
At what point, do you have any idea, like, at what point that can exist and what point it can't? How many subscriptions someone's likely 5 years from now to have?
So great question. So just to repeat for the video, talking about at what point are there too many subscriptions? There's no telling, right? So you brought up a great point. People are unbundling because of price and choice. I don't want to pay for content I never watch, and the price for my pay TV keeps going up. So I'm going to cut the cord. I'm going to go totally online, and I have to get 4 services to match what I want to get all the content that I want. When does it become unbearable? When does an Uber service not come into play, right? A meta service comes in and says, we'll allow you to cherry pick from different service providers. So imagine this. I'm a Game of Thrones fan. I'm not an HBO fan. So I subscribe to Game of Thrones on HBO just for the purpose of watching Game of Thrones. So I think we're going to get to a point where people are going to start to be able to subscribe to content itself through a provider versus subscribing to the provider as a whole. So that's my opinion, but that would be probably the most interesting development. Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
What's the second largest market after millennials?
I actually believe it's boomers, if I can remember right. And the reason is we're finding that they're spending a lot of time online, and they're starting to discover online video. And so they're gravitating towards it.
Did the study cover anything to do with the second screen?
We did not cover anything with second screens, no.
Compared to purchase content, so on iTunes Store, purchase videos, do you have any comparisons there?
No, we didn't get into what we didn't get into was any exploration around TVOD or SVOD or AVOD. So we didn't get into the different VOD subscription models. We just looked at OTT services. One more question. All right. If not, I think that's it. Hey, thanks a lot for attending, and sorry for the interruptions.